plagues. We reviewed how God made the Nile turn into blood, the land was overrun by frogs, the people were swarmed with lice, the houses were filled with insects, the livestock became diseased, people's skin became covered in boils, and then the skies rained hail and lightning. Next week will be locusts, darkness, and the death of the firstborn. I taught the 7th graders how each of the plagues might correlate with some deity from the Egyptian pantheon. The Torah explicitly states that God says, "I will make war on the gods of Egypt." The rabbis explain why were the waters of the Nile first struck? Because Pharaoh and the Egyptians worshiped the Nile, and God said, "I will strike their gods first and then their people." After each plague, we read how Pharaoh's heart trembles and then hardens, leading to the next disaster. The Egyptians did in fact worship the river Nile and Sobek the crocodile and Tawaret the hippopotamus. They also prayed to Heket, a fertility goddess with the head of a frog, Geb, the god of soil, Khepri with the head of a scarab beetle, Bastet with the head of a cat, Apis, the god of livestock with the head of a bull, Isis and Thoth, the goddess and god of medicine, Horus and Set, gods of sky and rain, Nepri, god of grain, Ra, chief god of the sun, and Pharaoh himself, who thought he was the divine embodied. It's not unreasonable to imagine that the Torah was saying that Adonai was taking down the gods of Egypt one by one. Each plague proved the idol's powerlessness to both the Egyptians and to the Israelites. That's when our bright and curious 7th grader asked, how come God doesn't send plagues against tyrants and bad people today? They keep you honest, those 7th graders. So I gave him 2 answers, and I'll give them to you as well. First, Rabbi Yitz Greenberg believes that God was more involved in the early days of humankind because God was raising us to be independent. The Bible took place during humanity's childhood, so to speak, and God had to intervene. By now, however, we're supposed to be more mature and independent and do things for ourselves. So that's one answer. Another answer, a rationalist answer, which is my answer, is that I don't read the Torah literally. Instead, I understand that the Torah was written by the ancient Israelites from their perspective. To ancient humanity in general, bad weather meant God was angry. To the Israelites, the Egyptians praying to their idols to no avail was proof that there was one God transcending everything. The Israelites could have seen the Egyptians struggling with boils, praying to Isis and Thoth to no effect, and then turn to their own God who was invisible, intangible, whose name you couldn't pronounce. For me, the real question is not, did this factually happen exactly as it is described in the Torah? The real question is, how do we interpret ancient literature? Something happened in ancient Egypt that proved to them that their idols were worthless, and this is how the Israelites described it with the words and concepts that they had at the time. This is what they thought and felt, and what can we learn from them? In other words, there is more than just fiction, which is made up, and nonfiction, which is factual reporting. There is also an in-between category called autobiography, which is people telling you their story from what they remember about what's true. And the Torah, I believe, is the autobiography of the ancient Israelites about their life with God. To illustrate this, I'll tell you 2 stories, and you decide which one is true. Story 1. Several decades ago, the Israeli Defense Forces sent envoys out to the population in Ethiopia because it was rumored that there were some lost tribes of Jews who lived there. And the reports came back that were staggering. A pre-rabbinic group of rabbis, a group of Jews with Hebrew and recognizable Jewish rituals lived in abject poverty there. The Ethiopian Jews were greatly discriminated against and starving from famine. After a great deal of communication and coordination, the Israeli government decided to airlift these Jewish people out and bring them to the state of Israel. The agreement to find a time and location took months of haggling with Ethiopian despots and came only after many painful delays. Many of the Ethiopian Jews died while waiting for an agreement to be reached, and upon arriving at the rendezvous in Sudan, next door, most of the Ethiopian Jews had not seen an airplane, or gotten close to an airplane, I should say, or any of those modern technologies before, but they were packed into the airplanes, and that airlift still holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the most people crammed into a 747. They were brought into absorption centers in Israel and are now part of Israeli society today. So that's story number one. You ready? Story number two. The Ethiopian Jews got word that the Jewish people had returned to their homeland and the time of exile was ending. A new Jewish government had been set up, and messengers came from that land and reached them. The time of departure was coming, and they waited. Some of them had died while waiting, but they still had faith. And finally, they walked the difficult journey to their destination far away in Sudan. The planes touched down, and the landing inspired tremendous awe and fear. Persevering, they climbed and were flown on the wings of eagles to the promised land. Thus did God miraculously redeem them with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, as we say on Pesach, on Passover. So which story is true? The answer is both is true. Both are true. The first story contains more accurate facts, but the second invokes wonder and awe of what the people felt. So our stories in the Torah are similar. Whether they speak of splitting seas or thundering mountains, all of our stories are told from people's perspectives, using what inadequate language we have to describe what we see and feel. And we pass these stories down from generation to generation, occasionally writing them down. We pass along not only the memories of the events, but also how we felt at the time. It is a memory that we try to articulate and give to those who come after us. We not only inherit the story, but add our chapter to the autobiography of the Jewish people, instructing those who will come after us. I believe God created the world, gave us commandments, and is still commanding us. The rest is up to us. We need to read our Torah as poetry that is speaking to us, calling us to action with its metaphors. This is the way that our ancestors are trying to teach us through the generations. Consider Rabbi Arthur Waskow's interpretation of the 10 plagues for today. He writes, when a society acts idolatrous, when corporations act like Pharaoh by ignoring the common good in order to maximize their own power, nature itself rebels. The rivers turn to blood, frogs and vermin infest the earth, animals get sick, thick clouds of smoke blot out the sun and moon, ultimately human beings die. Indeed, the whole plague cycle in Exodus could be understood as a growing series of eco-disasters. If I asked you to list some forms of idolatry and plagues that occur today, including plagues of our own making, I am sure each one of you could unfortunately think of many. The question is if our hearts will get hardened like Pharaoh, or if we will work together for liberation like Moses. I also imagine that each of you can think of moments of redemption, of times when hope broke through. Our ancestors were trying to teach us something. Are we able to hear them, understand them, feel what they felt, and learn? Shabbat Shalom. We're going to now return to our Sidurim, to our prayer books, to page 282. If you're here to say Kaddish and you would like to come up onto the bima to help open the ark doors, I want to invite you up now. So anybody who is here to say Kaddish and would like to come up to the bima, please come up and do so. I'd like to ask the rest of the congregation to please stand as you're able. Page 282, we're looking at the bottom half of the page.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'teit kedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kegoyei haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu k'chol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה
Please be seated. Our lives are built upon the lives of others, and we